He's about 20 minutes into his talk, and he notices someone in the front row has fallen asleep. I can't believe what happened next. He stopped his whole presentation, just stopped it, and he said to the person next to the one asleep, "Your friend's asleep, that's rude. I'm doing a presentation, will you wake him up?" The audience member said back to the speaker, "You put him to sleep, you wake him up." So, that is when I learned never mess with the audience, because you don't know what's coming back. You don't know what's coming back. A big part of it is change. Change happens all the time, and that's a problem, because human beings don't like change. We don't like it. We don't like change. We like knowing what we're doing, and we like knowing how to do it, most of us. Most of us don't like change. When organisations get me in to talk specifically about change, I always say to them, well, people don't like change. I say, it's like learning to drive. Most people, when they learn to drive a car, find it difficult, find it impossible for the first 3 or 4 lessons. They find it very, very difficult to do, and they don't like the lessons. They get upset, they get frustrated, they panic, they don't like it, they feel embarrassed, they really don't like it, it's painful. But of course, they keep at it, they get good at it, and then they get so good at it that it's on autopilot. And those of us that have, drive, we've probably experienced the fact that we can be driving along, drinking our coffee, eating our sandwich, not recommended, of course, for safety reasons, but we can be doing those things and we think, did I look at those traffic lights? I just went over that busy junction. I don't remember looking. I just went round that busy roundabout. I don't remember looking. It's on autopilot. We've got good at it. That's what happens when we practice over and over again. We get good at things. They go on autopilot. But before they get on autopilot, when we're learning, it's difficult, it's hard, it's painful. And that is the situation that I say to organisations. You are putting people in when you say, we're going to change something. Things are going to change. We're going to do something differently. Whether it's the process, whether it's the systems we use. That's like saying to people, you are going back to driving lesson 1 and you're not going to like it. Now, what happens when change comes along? The 5% is different to the 95%. The 95%, when change comes along, start thinking of all the reasons why it won't work. That won't work because of this. That won't work because of that. That won't work because of this. The 5% don't think like that. The 5%, no matter how hard the challenge, think, how can we make this work? When you ask the mind different questions, you get different answers. I said it earlier, I'll say it again, it's about focus. When we say, it will never work, this will never work, our mind looks for evidence to support it. That's what our minds do. Our minds want us to be safe and secure as human beings. So when we say something to ourselves or have a thought, it wants to look for evidence to support it. So when we say something won't work, our mind looks for all the evidence to support it, and we go, see, I was right, I was right, I was right. But if we say to ourselves, do you know what, it might be a challenge, it might be difficult, but there's bound to be a way. Let's find a way. Let's look into it. Let's find a way. Let's see what could make this work. Ideas will start to come because it's about focus. And I'm going to prove it to you with a few real-world examples you've probably experienced. You could be busy working away, not a care in the world. You're really engaged in what you're doing. And somebody will say to you, isn't that fan noisy? Or isn't that air conditioning unit noisy? You can't get that noise out of your head now. Before they mentioned it, you couldn't hear that noise. You hadn't noticed that background noise until someone mentioned it. Your mind had shut off your physical hearing from hearing a noise because it didn't think it was relevant to you in that moment. Our minds, the conscious part of our mind, our current awareness, can only track 5 to 9 things at once. Everything else is subconscious, millions of things. Our minds have to decide every minute what are the 5 to 9 things you need to be aware of. The fan wasn't one of them until they mentioned it and made it relevant. Now you can't stop hearing it. Another example is cars. A lot of people have had this example and this experience. You've got a car. You decide you want a different car. You know the make of car you want. You know the model of car you want. You know everything about that car. And you don't see many on the road until you get one. And then you see that car everywhere. And I can see from people in the audience that you've had this experience. You want a particular car, you know the make, model, and colour. You think it's quite rare until you get one. Well, what's happened? Has the universe put a load more down overnight just to play games with you? No. What's happened is focus has shifted. You've shifted from wanting one of those cars and not having one to having one of those cars. So in the mind, with focus and relevance, the mind doesn't see that what we want and that what we haven't got is relevant to us. So we don't notice it. But soon as we've got one, the mind sees it as relevant, and because it wants to match on relevance, it shows us the car. So previously, this is how it plays out. Before you get the car, you're driving along in your current car, might be talking to somebody, or you might be on the phone, or you might be listening to music. Car comes down the road, exactly what you want. Subconscious mind sees it, notices it, but thinks, not relevant. You haven't got one, not relevant, so you don't notice it. You're not disturbed from your current focus to notice it. But as soon as you get the car, because the emotional attachment, if you like, has changed to it, the thought process, now it will disturb what you're doing and distract your focus to see it. So when I'm saying that our mind controls our focus to change what we physically hear and what we physically see, it is much easier to understand that our mind changes the ideas we have, and if we keep thinking of why things won't work, we will rarely find a solution. But if instead we say to our minds, no, we want to think of how can we make this work? What could make this better? What could we do differently? You'll start to have ideas. Maybe not immediately, but over the next 10 minutes or the next couple of days. The key to being in the 5% is to get curious. Is to get curious and start saying those questions, what could make it different? What could make it work?